Hello, and welcome back to the Counteract podcast. My name is Allison Lind. I'm the host of the Thursday Arts, Pop Culture, and NYC segment. And I'm coming at you guys today with a little chat about the movie Nefarious, because we started our series on like Christians and horror films. 2 weeks ago, I made an episode about should Christians watch horror and kind of the contentions with like the theology of that and how should we approach it. So if you haven't watched that episode, you definitely should go back and listen to that or watch it on YouTube. And then last week we were supposed to talk about Nefarious, and then I talked about instead the protests and everything that has been happening on college campuses in New York and especially at Columbia. Also a cool episode worth checking out. I think it's a very interesting time up here in the city. But now I'm in finals week and life is chaos. So you guys are getting a super half-baked episode on basically just my super strong, inarticulate thoughts on the movie Nefarious. So I hope you guys enjoy. It'll probably hopefully be a little bit of a shorter episode today. Just thank you guys for bearing with me. Hopefully when I'm a free woman, when I'm graduated, I'll actually be able to produce quality content. So yeah, stick around. Before we get into Nefarious, though, I'm going to talk to you guys about our sponsor. You know them. You love them. It is Patriot Mobile. If you are tired of compromising and giving money to companies that don't support your values, then you should switch to Patriot Mobile. Honestly, if you haven't done that by now, I don't know what you're doing because we talk about them in every episode. So, like, get on with it. They're America's only Christian conservative wireless provider, and they're an example of putting their supporters ahead of their profits. Patriot Mobile offers dependable nationwide coverage, giving you access to all three major networks, which means you get the same coverage you've been accustomed to without funding the left. When you switch to Patriot Mobile, you support the First Amendment, the Second Amendment, the sanctity of life, and our military veterans and first responder heroes. Their 100% US-based customer service team makes switching super easy. You can keep your number, your phone, and your upgrade. Their team will help you find the best plan to fit your needs. Just go to patriotmobile.com/counteract or call 972-PATRIOT, and you can get free activation when you use the offer code COUNTERACTUSA. Once again, patriotmobile.com/counteract or 972-PATRIOT. Join us. Join the cult. Make a switch today. All right, Nefarious. I didn't script out an episode for this, guys. So we're just going to start rambling. Also, my friend Grace is here. Yep. My friend Grace is here across the room. And she's heard this little Nefarious rant before. So I might be talking to her a bit as we go through this. But yeah. Okay, Nefarious. For those that don't know, Nefarious came out in April of 2023. It was a self-proclaimed Christian horror film. And I know that I'm a year late to this like review thing, but I just think it's interesting since we're like on the topic of like what should Christians consume and how should we consume it? But also as an artist, what kind of art should we be creating as Christians and how should we be creating it? And Nefarious is a perfect example of maybe what not to do. So they marketed themselves as a Christian. Well, they didn't even market themselves as Christian. They just marketed themselves as this like crazy, demonic, like true crime story kind of. And they put a lot of action in their trailer, which I know a lot of people were peeved because they watched the movie and it wasn't a lot of action. It would end up being like a movie where they just sat and had a conversation almost the entire time. So I know that was like one thing people were kind of mad about, but they didn't outright market themselves as Christian. However, because of the production studio and the people backing it, we all kind of knew that they were going to be Christian conservative. And I remember there was a lot of speculation and a little bit of backlash in Hollywood, same as there was with like Sound of Freedom and just most like conservative-based movies. So that's not surprising. But you get into the movie and you realize that this is a movie about Christianity, specifically based on, or at least inspired by, the book Screwtape Letters by C.S. Lewis, which is just basically talking about like demonic. Here's the thing. Okay, I'm just going to get into it now. They say that it's inspired by Screwtape Letters, But the difference between Nefarious and Screwtape Letters is that Screwtape Letters is about a Christian man being tempted and tried by demons. However, he doesn't walk away from his faith. And the whole book is a commentary on the Christian walk. How do we work around spiritual warfare? How do we recognize tactics of the enemy? And how do we see the goodness of God and the victory of God in the midst of that warfare? Nefarious, on the other hand, I don't know where they latched on to this other than the fact that there's like demonic possession in the world. Basically, it's about this prison inmate who claims, or, we believe, like, the viewer knows that he is possessed by a demon named Nefarious. This atheist psychiatrist comes in and sits down, and he is in charge, essentially, of either sentencing this man to death row or saying that he's clinically insane and therefore exempt. And so the whole movie is about this demon inside of this man named Edward, the inmate. This demon trying to convince this atheist that the demons are real. And that's the entire premise of the movie. Just outright, like, I'll just say it. I mean, a lot of you watching this have probably already seen the movie, but they forget to put the gospel in it. They claim to be a Christian movie, and they don't put the gospel in it. It's entirely about, essentially, the victory of Satan in this movie. And I'll get into that a little bit in a minute, but I also do remember hearing, this is alleged, I should fact check it. You can go fact check me. I think Mormons made the movie. Like, they claim to be Christian, but I think they were actually Mormon. If I remember correctly, I don't know. I got to go back and look. I mean, same as the Sound of Freedom people, Exodus Cry, Mormons. Like, I'm making Grace laugh. I'm super happy that Mormons. I'm super happy that they are making strides to bring like heavier subjects to the mainstream media. Very grateful for that. But with something like Nefarious, I feel like it was almost a little like low-key dangerous because they forget to put the gospel in the movie. So basically, just to give you the premise and the rundown, this demon tries to convince the psychiatrist the entire movie that demons are real, and he knows everything about this man, right? Like, he knows that he euthanized his grandma last year, and that as they're speaking, his girlfriend is walking into the abortion appointment, and he knows like his thoughts and his intentions, and like obviously he's using these as tactics to scare the man. And the other tactic that Nefarious has in this moment is also to take Edward to the grave. So it's an interesting, like, I do find this part interesting as far as like character, like, what's the word? Like intentions. There's an acting word for it. It's motivation, motives, like our when you do your like actions, but it's like, it's not like adjectives or like verbs. It's like almost beats subtext. Like, you go in and you write your like word for each line. What's that called? Is that called motive?
Motives, yeah, like
oh.
True intentions.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah. Well, you guys know what I mean. Like, from the actor perspective, it is an interesting character study to like learn what Nefarious is, like, his intentions are, both objective. That's what it is. The objectives. Because Nefarious, for the man, he wants him to realize that demons are real, and he wants him to be afraid. But for Edward, he also wants to take him to the grave. So naturally, they have a few conversations about it in the movie where Nefarious is basically like, you could just deem him clinically insane right now and walk out of here happy ever after. But then Nefarious makes him mad. So his fight is no longer with Edward, it's with the demons. And he ultimately ends up sentencing him to death. And there's even other tactics. The horror of this movie is when the priest comes in. They call in a priest because this man's claiming to be possessed by demons. So they call in this priest. The priest comes in and he sits down and he basically says, "Oh, demons and possession, they're kind of beyond, our understanding has moved beyond that now. We understand mental health is a problem." And he walks out, and that's all he does. And if that is not an accurate representation of the Western church, I don't know what is. So that was horrific. I stand by that. That was good commentary on their part. But then that was horrific. But then, so this man goes to death row, and the moment that always gets me, which is also the second horrific part for me, and this is where I'm kind of going with, like, I don't even know if it's like the best for Christians to watch, because as I've mentioned in my previous episode, I do watch a lot of horror movies and I find them to be really interesting artistic parallels to the gospel, and actually they provide some really interesting commentary, because at the end of the day, horror, which I talk about in the other episode, and also what part of the intention of the creators of this movie was or is that horror is the closest genre to, like, forcing us, outside of Christian movies themselves, forcing us to realize that there is a higher spiritual realm. Like, if you believe in the supernatural enough to be afraid of it, then there's a part of you that's already acknowledging that demons are real somehow. And so I think Nefarious, the creator's intentions were to play off of this idea that we have to acknowledge that there's a darker spiritual reality. But if you're going to scare people into believing that demons are real, why would you not tell them about the good God who has already defeated them? The way that the movie ends is that Edward is tortured up until the very end. The scene about his last meal, I'm not going to talk about it because I'll just cry, but, like, he doesn't get his last meal because the demon denies it from him, essentially. And this man goes to the grave tormented, and he loses. Like, we see Satan win in this movie, and that's terrible. And, like, one thing I talked to Grace about a while back was, like, if there's a person who we know, I guess this is making me think about the pastor again, but if there's a person who we know is so curious about God, like, because they talk about in the movie that it takes a series of yeses to become possessed by a demon. Like, we as Christians don't have to worry about it because we're not going to say those yeses, but there are people out there who are searching and they will say yes. And, like, Edward, I mean, it's so tragic because the character of Edward, he's not someone to be condemned. But the fact that he, first of all, said the yeses, as far as, like, the justice of the Lord goes, that's enough because he didn't accept Christ. But also, you reach a point where the enemy, like, you are fully in the enemy's grasp. And for nobody in this movie, the priest, the psychiatrist, the officers, I mean, there were so many people, like, contemplating what to do with this man. The fact that nobody could tell that or cared enough to save him from this or to, like, get him out of it. Like, I'm so disgusted by the character of the priest because he should have sat down and said, in Jesus' name be cast out. And, like, here's a loving God who loves you and saves you and redeems you. But we don't see that in the movie. We see him go to the electric chair. And not only that, but the psychiatrist, he doesn't even get saved either in the end of the movie. The last scene of the movie is where he's sitting in an interview, basically just having released this new book. And up until the very end, he's, like, denying that demons are real. And then when the man is in the electric chair, he hears this voice. And I don't remember what it is. I don't remember if it's supposed to be God or if it's supposed to be the demons, but he realizes that, like, Nefarious is real and he exists outside of Edward. He possesses, like, someone else in the room. And so basically he's forced to acknowledge at least that there is a darker spiritual realm. But and there's like he hints at like, I'm curious about God, but it ends so loosely and open-ended. Like he's, he doesn't, we just don't see like God getting a hold of him in this movie. And that's so, so tragic. And I know that, hey, that's the way of the world. And maybe their intention was to be realistic with it. And sure, like I can understand that. But I think if you're going to claim to be a Christian movie, you need to put the gospel in. Like you're not saving anyone by scaring them into believing in demons. You're saving someone by showing them a God who has conquered demons and conquered death. Like, I think it would have been so much more powerful, and you can still do this. I don't know how. Like, I don't think anyone's done this before, but I do believe there's a way to make a good horror movie that is effective while still, like, including the gospel. Like, imagine if they had, like, fought this demon, whatever that looks like, and Edward is saved in the end. And then that salvation then converts the psychiatrist. I mean, the Exorcist movies are probably a better example of the gospel than Nefarious. And Nefarious is the one that claims to be Christian. Because at least in the Exorcist movies, they say, in the name of Jesus be cast out, and the demons go. So, I don't know. I just think that, like, this movie missed the mark. And the reason I want to talk about it specifically is, everyone's heard the reviews already. But, like, the reason I want to talk about it is because how are we gonna create art? Like, we've got to do better than this, guys. And I know that we're doing this. Like, Jesus Revolution is amazing. There's really good musicians coming up. Like, I do think the next generation of Christians is moving for the kingdom artistically. But I don't know. I just think that there's a way to include the gospel in a horror movie, if that's really our intention, that is edifying, that is glorifying to God. So many people talk about how, like, we just shouldn't watch horror, we shouldn't touch it because essentially in most horror movies, like, evil wins. And even Nefarious, the one that is self-proclaimed Christian, evil wins in the end. Like, we see the victory of Satan over this man, and it's just so sad. And honestly, it spiritually messed me up for like weeks. And I watched it with a non-believer. Because, everyone says, oh, this is a great movie to bring your non-believer friends to and start the conversation. I watched it with a non-believer, and they were disturbed by it. They didn't see the gospel. They didn't see Jesus. They were like, is that really what you believe? And I was like, no. Like, I believe in a God who saves. Like, Jesus on the cross conquered these demons. This movie is not an accurate example of my faith. So that's my rant about Nefarious. And I think this is my call to action for a Christian out there who either has an idea, has a talent, knows someone who has a talent. Maybe you know a guy who could produce a movie. Let's make good Christian movies that are pushing the boundaries of genre. I would love to make a horror movie or like some alternative indie, like, A24 makes great movies. Like, I know they're not Christian, but like A24 horror movies, I walk out being like sometimes disturbed, but mostly encouraged. Like, I kind of get a fire under my butt, or like, whatever that phrase is. Being like, wow, I cannot believe that they were able to portray this like, okay, Midsummer, for example. I'll talk about this in another episode, but Midsummer is this like cultish psychological horror movie, but really it's a commentary about a woman getting out of an abusive relationship. Like, how do you take something so real and relatable and use imagery and art direction and writing and all of these beautiful, like the beautiful effects of cinema to expand this story into something that's a more visceral experience for the viewers. Like, we as Christians need to latch on to that and create art like that with the gospel in mind. I mean, like, y'all have read the Bible, right? Like, we could spend a lifetime creating art and movies and, I mean, music, like all kinds of things on just one singular verse. Like, it is so full of life and it's so deep, and like there's so many ways that we can go with it artistically, I think, that we just haven't like tapped into yet. So that's my rant about Nefarious. I promise in the next few episodes with the movies I'll do more of an in-depth, like, artistic analysis, but I didn't really have anything for Nefarious because I was just disappointed in them. And yeah, yeah, that's my episode. I hope you guys enjoy it. Don't watch Nefarious, please. Don't. Especially if you're a Christian. All right. I hope to see y'all again. Well, I mean, I'll see y'all next week. If you have suggestions for an episode that you want me to talk about or check out, look into, please let me know. I need help coming up with content. It's been a chaotic season. And I just want to do things that you guys like listening to. So let me know. You know the drill. Like, comment, subscribe. Check it out on YouTube. Follow us on Instagram. The Josiah Generation Conference, September 13th through 14th. Get your tickets. It is going to be so good. The Lord is rallying his troops this year. You do not want to miss out on what he's doing. And you want to make sure that you're equipped. And this conference is going to be the one to help you do that. Allie Beth Stuckey will be speaking. There's some really good other speakers lined up. Your girl will be there. So get on out. Get on out there. If you don't live in Arkansas, make a trip to Arkansas. Yeah, you guys don't want to miss it. Last year's conference was epic. This one's going to be even better. The Lord has done some crazy things to provide for the venue and the funding, and you don't want to miss it. So go. I don't even know if tickets are live yet. I could just be promoting this. If the tickets are live, go get your tickets. If not, stay tuned. Okay, love you guys. Bye.